afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 14 of Wowhead Weekly. This week we've had two builds, we've had some BlizzCon info, and a few other bits of news, but hold the presses, stop the presses, it's all going on right here, because this week we have got a healing special for you. First up, let me introduce Wowhead's site manager and my co-host extraordinaire, Peculiar. How are you doing this week, Perk? How's it going?
I'm happy with the two builds after we got 5 or 6 last week, so, pretty easy week.
Yeah.
Build, patch next week, but no build, so that's, it's like vacation.
Definitely, it's just really nice. It's just nice for them to slow down a bit after how frantic it's been for everyone on Wowhead. So I mentioned that we had two amazing healing experts coming in, and I'm going to introduce them right now. So here we go. On the left-hand side of the screen, right below me right here, we've got Hamlet, and below Perk on the other side of the screen, we have got Diani, aka Heliocentric on Twitter. Now, these Twitter names are going to be up all the way through the show, so if you're like just so amazed by how amazing these guys are, and trust me, they are amazing, you can follow them on Twitter at these handles all the way through the show. So let's get started. And we thought we'd hit up some news first just to get the show on the road. And we've also had the BlizzCon schedule announced this week, which was super exciting. I was very interested to note some interesting gaps in the schedule.
Yeah, I was most excited by the empty space on the schedule.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's just talk about the WoW side of it first. So, and do feel free to weigh in on this, Hamlet and Diani. Do you think that we're going to see anything about the expansion after Warlords of Draenor? Obviously, we heard about Warlords at the last BlizzCon. What's your take on that? What do you think, Perk?
So I don't think we will. I think it's just going to be a hype train for Warlords, and the items and class panel, I think we might see some stuff for later patches in Warlords, like the heirloom stuff, for example, that was teased at the last BlizzCon that didn't make it into, launch. I think maybe we'll see more details on that, or maybe a new raid, but I don't think we'll see something for the next expansion. I think they just want to make people excited and celebrate Warlords coming up and sort of turn BlizzCon into a party for Warlords.
Yeah, exactly. It seems likely to me. And Hamlet, do you think we're going to see anything for future patches, maybe? Like other content they might be bringing out in the next one down the line, perhaps?
Probably something like that. I mean, it's 4 days before launch. I don't want to distract from launch too much. But, they've always unveiled upcoming content for people to get excited about in some way. They'll probably have that panel where the heads of the game come out and talk about whatever they can talk about that's not yet released.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that. Something just loudly clanged in the background here. I'm not exactly sure what that was. We do live in a flat, so it's possibly people running around outside. So the other interesting thing which we mentioned was these empty slots. So Perk, first up, just run us through which are the empty slots. You've got one right after the opening ceremony, right?
Right, and that's usually when, if you remember last BlizzCon, that's when they talked about Warlords of Draenor in more detail. So we've got this big and empty gap from 12 to 2 p.m., and there's nothing going on then. There's no Hearthstone panel, there's no Heroes panel, there's no Diablo panel. It's just this big blank gap. And it's also suspicious because they released the floor plan, and we also have this gap in front of one of the entrances where there's usually a lot of stuff or demos going on. So we think the two gaps might be kind of related. We're not sure what it is, but we think that it's for, something new or special, something not announced yet, perhaps.
Yeah, it seems pretty likely that there's going to be something along those lines going in there. But we've also got some other BlizzCon-related news, mostly that we announced our Wowhead party. We've announced it, we've mentioned it on the show before, so if you've been watching the show for a little while, then it's likely that you've heard us talk about it in the past. We put an official announcement up on the site, and we are super excited about it. We're really, really excited to see tons of people coming down. We've got so much going on, haven't we?
It's been kind of funny trying to organize the Warlords data along with the BlizzCon planning, but we have a live stream going on that has tons of guests. If you tuned in last year, we even had Ghostcrawler do a brief interview on the stream, so we're hoping to get popular Twitch streamers, popular faces in the community up on the stream. We give away thousands of prizes. We've all been contacting people that we know from all over the place. Pretty much everyone at ZAM has been getting tons of swag, gaming headset discounts, coupons, swag you can wear, Blizzard products, so tons of cool things. And we also have adorable artwork on the news post itself. So you should check that out. It's by our site artist Noxie, and people totally love it. Just wanted to give her a plug because she does
Exactly.
amazing stuff for us.
She really does. And actually, one of the prizes, if you're a fan of Noxie's work, and I know that pretty much everyone on this panel is a fan of Noxie's work, we all think she's amazing. And one of the things you could win is actually a Noxie original character art of your character, which we'll be giving away at the party. So I'm super excited about that. I've had Noxie do my badges for the past couple of years, and she's done a couple of private commissions for me as well. And she is just amazing. She is a really, really fantastic artist, and she's really manages to sort of capture the characters really nicely. But we've also got a giveaway going on. So we sort of have what the about Wow, what's going on with Wowhead section, which we're going to hit up later in the show. It's always the giveaway section, but we wanted to mention this one right at the top of the show. So Perk, just fill us in on the giveaway that we're doing right now.
So we, because the beta is, Warlords is coming. We've mixed it up. We're not really doing our big beta key giveaways anymore. Although we do a few to give away, we'll be slipping them in now and then. But we're focusing about BlizzCon and getting everyone hyped up for BlizzCon and the party. So we're giving away 4 virtual tickets, and we've learned that you can't gift them quite yet, so we'll be giving you BattleNet credit, so you can take that credit and then, buy the ticket on your own. So we're giving away, 4 of you can get enough BattleNet credit to buy the virtual ticket, and that includes super cool things. You get, replays of all of the streams going on. You get the super cool in-game stuff like the Gromlock Murloc pet, the Diablo Warlord transmog, the super cool pony for heroes, StarCraft stuff, and the Hearthstone card back. And it's about, there's a ton of stuff. It's about, $40 or so of value. And we'll be doing BlizzCon-themed giveaways leading up to BlizzCon and the party. So we're really excited that so many people love the post, love the artwork. And I should also mention it's super easy to enter in this week. You don't have to do something in game. You don't have to have an active WoW account. You just need to comment on the post with the cute artwork about what you're really looking forward to at BlizzCon. That's simple comment to enter, and we will then email you with the BattleNet codes, which you can then add to your account after the giveaway is over next Monday, I think, or Tuesday. It's on the post.
Yeah, exactly that. So let's move into the bulk of our show. We promised you a healing special, and a healing special we will most definitely be delivering. So we have got 4 people on the show right now. 2 of us are the usual Wowhead Weekly hosts, me and Perk on the top, Hamlet and Dayani on the bottom. And Hamlet and Dayani are our healing experts for this week. So first up, Dayani, just give us a little bit of history of you, so just in case people aren't aware of what you do, your amazing blog, and all of your healing expertise. So when did you start playing? What are your classes? How did you get into WoW and healing?
All right, well, I started playing just before BC came out as part of a deal with my boyfriend. The trade-off was he would buy and wear brown business shoes with his business slacks, and I would play WoW. And then at the end of that week, I got a nasty WoW habit, and he got some brown shoes.
Nice.
I started out as a warlock, but I discovered healing a few months in, and I haven't gone back since. Like, it's just absolutely been the best thing in any game for me ever. So I play Resto Shaman. I've been maining Resto Shaman since about 4 months into BC, and I've worked my way up from being a casual pugger into a pretty serious progression guild, Something Wicked.
That is awesome. So you've really gone through. You play a bunch of other healers as well. It's not just Resto
both
Shaman
of you guys have like Proving Ground Endless on all the specs. They're very modest. Dayani is very modest.
Exactly. So tell us about that. Which specs, Dayani? Which specs do you play for healers? What healers do you have? Max level, Proving Grounds, all of this on.
Okay, well, I have every healer at max level because I just can't get enough of healing. I have raided all expansion on Mistweaver Monk as my primary alt, and then Resto Druid as well. So I have kind of let my Paladin and Priest slide a little, but every spec that heals has proven healer criteria, which was a struggle, but it was a lot of fun.
So let me just get that straight.
Priest is pretty crazy,
golds, right?
Yeah, that's right, and challenge mode golds too, but that was nothing compared to Priest Proving
Let's
Grounds.
just rewind this a little bit. So you have Proving Ground, Endless, Proven Healer on every single healing spec.
Yes, that's right.
Wow, that is pretty cool. That's some hard work. So, okay, just real quickly, which one was the hardest? Which one did you find the hardest to get the Endless Proven Healer?
Oh my gosh, disgraced. It took me 24
really?
literal hours of attempts.
Wow, that's some dedication right there. All right, Hamlet, not to be outdone, tell us all about your healing history, how you got into WoW, all of that good stuff.
I've been playing WoW since just after release. I was a mage at first. I switched to a druid. I guess it was a while ago now. It was in TBC. And I've oscillated between playing a lot of balance and resto, but I've gotten more and more into Theorycraft as time goes on, and this expansion I got more and more into focusing on healing and started spending more time looking at even healers other than druids.
There are healers other than druids. What madness is this?
You should tell us about your healing project. That's awesome and applies to all
Yes, you
healers
definitely
that you've been
should.
doing for Warlords.
Right, so I finished my big Theorycraft project was this huge spreadsheet for modeling all the healing classes. It was a takeoff of Tree Calcs, my Resto Druid one for the last 2 expansions, but I expanded it to all the healers, and I've been using it to make posts and compare class balance and evaluate tuning changes and give them suggestions and all of that kind of stuff. And I have it posted on our website now, which I'm sure we can throw into the links.
Yeah,
when this is
absolutely.
posted.
We'll put it into the post on Wowhead, which will be right down there in the post on Wowhead. It is iam.yellingontheinternet.com/healercalcs, I believe. So if you were quick enough to write that down, then awesome. But if you weren't, I'm sure Hamlet will be able to. There we go. He's already typed it into the chat room. So efficient. So it's going to be right there, and you can check that out and learn an absolute ton about healing. And you've got this I am yelling on the internet is not just for the healer calculators either, is it? You've got a ton of blogging and all that sort of stuff that you do on there.
Yeah, Perk and I both write various things about WoW there or other games, or it's just a general blog to put stuff on. But lately, with beta going on, it's sort of been nonstop healing posts.
Yeah, you also have that great post on what people should keep in mind, like what makes someone be a good raider, a good player in general, and covering things that people maybe gloss over in favor of more sort of showy or stereotypical things. And that was a really popular post maybe 6 months ago. I'm not sure, but that's another good post we should check out and definitely throw in the links.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of good stuff. And we also have to mention, Dayani, you've got heliocentric. Just tell us the URL of your blog.
Yeah, it's heliocentric.wordpress.com.
There we go.
And that heliocentric thing is hard to spell because it's like a real word.
Yeah, it's all right now because it's right underneath your screen. It's right there, so right below Diane's beautiful face, we've got the heliocentric element of her blog. So if you're interested in finding out more information about any of these guys, do just check out their blogs there. But let's get into the show. So what we're looking to discuss in here is to give you a rundown of the big, heavy healing changes in Warlords of Draenor, and also to get these guys' expert opinion on just exactly what that means for different healers, how it's going to work in raids, dungeons, all of that good stuff. So let's start out with sort of the really, really big changes in Warlords of Draenor. Obviously, we've got the ability squish coming in, which is a pretty substantial change. So, Dayani, what's been the biggest impact on healing as a whole from the ability squish? What's the big stuff that we're seeing taken away from healers?
Well, the mana cooldowns is the biggest thing that's been taken away from healers. Pretty much everything else hasn't had too huge of an impact on your spell choice, but taking away that ability to, kind of get some mana back in an emergency situation and replacing it with making you make decisions about spending your mana wisely, that's going to be probably the biggest effect that you'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mana cooldowns that have gone, has every healer lost every mana cooldown or mana regenerating ability, or are there some that have stuck around?
There are some that have stuck around. All of your 3-minute timers, they're pretty much gone. There's no Hymn of Hope. There's no Mana Tide. So, all of you other healers can stop leaning on your shamans for help.
Yeah.
But some people do still have a few ways to get some mana back. Shaman have a new spirit boost from Elemental Blast. And
Mana Tea.
Yep, Mana Tea for monks is still in, and priests have access to Solace, which is really quite handy.
Nice.
Pretty good mana return ability.
And there's still Mindbender, which is something people are often confused about, that Shadow Fiend no longer regens mana, but Mindbender does if you take the talent.
Okay, so that gives you the option to talent into a mana regen ability in that line, but Shadow Fiend doesn't regen mana at all anymore, right?
That's right.
Well, there you go.
So
Sorry, Pet, go ahead.
I was going to say that I don't play a healer, but working on all the item stuff for Wowhead, I've of course noticed that Spirit has had some changes, and it's not on as many slots of gear. Can you talk about that a bit, and what does that mean, and where exactly can healers find Spirit now when the pre-patch hits on Tuesday?
You can find it on rings, necks, cloaks, and trinkets. I think, I don't remember for sure if this is happening in 6.0, if it'll disappear all of your items now, but it's not going to be on those slots in the expansion. I mean, on slots other than the ones I just said.
So like your chest, your helms, pretty much just the accessories. Those are the slots that have spirit.
Yeah, the basic idea is that Spirit's going to be a lot stronger, but it's limited to a few slots. So in total, it kind of works out the way it does now as far as how much regen you get, but it's all concentrated on a few slots, and you're going to really want to have Spirit items on those slots. So those will kind of be healer items again.
Yeah, so it's sort of a case of, if I understand it correctly, your base mana regen from Spirit or your base Spirit is much higher, and the impact from those pieces of gear is still significant. Basically that, yeah. So it's definitely a big change. Is it the case that if you don't have those Spirit slots, you're going to be completely ineffective in max level content?
I think you'll have a lot less regen than you would be expected to have. I mean, it would be like wearing essentially no Spirit right now, which isn't a great example because one of the problems with healing right now is how little regen you need. But yeah, it would be like going in with much less than your expected amount of regen. Those few
It'd be like not
items
having
of
your
Spirit
legendary
will be a
mana
lot.
gem.
What was that, sorry?
Yeah.
It'd be like not having your legendary meta gem.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of, I kind of understood from BlizzCon that it was a case of we were going to have a much higher level of base Spirit, but we were going to also sort of see more impact from that stuff from gear. It's a case of you've got a huge amount of impact from each individual piece with Spirit, or like is it like doubling your mana regen? How big an impact does those 5 pieces of Spirit gear? Like
They give you about as much regen as your full suit of, in theory, Spirit bearing gear does now.
Wow, so that is actually quite a lot. So that's kind of interesting to know. And it's only on those 5 slots. So we've also got the Spirit stat. Are we getting any Spirit from the attunement stuff, or is that really just the primary stats?
Yeah, which stats are covered for each spec?
With a stat attunement?
No healers has Spirit as their attunement. It's all other normal secondary stats.
So
but
things
healers
like
will be
crit,
expected
mastery.
to have Spirit always. But yeah.
It's crit mastery,
Those
that
other
sort of
stats.
thing. And are those stats good? Are they the good stats? So you guys are the theory crafters here. Do you feel like they've done it right for all the individual healers, Dayani?
Yeah, I think they've done it pretty well. It's going to be a little bit rough on Holy Priests and on Monks because their attunement is multi-strike, and when 6.0.2 hits, you're not going to have any multi-strike unless you have the Nazgrim's Burnished Insignia, I think the trinket is called. The multi-strike gear just isn't going to be out there for you. But once you actually start getting into Warlords, once it's launched and you start questing, I'm sure you'll find plenty of multi-strike and you'll get to play around with that super fun stat.
Yeah, it's also good to remember that in this interim period before Warlords goes live, that don't take this sort of as the definite class balance. So stuff might be a little wonky at level 90 because people don't have all their talents and perks. So, not having multi-strike on Siege of Orgrimmar gear does not mean that the class is in bad shape.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to make it impossible for you to complete Siege of Orgrimmar just because you don't have a tiny little bit of multi-strike from one trinket. So don't freak out about that, I guess, is the method. So you mentioned this earlier. We touched on this earlier. Let's go a little bit more in depth with this now. The effects that it's having on different classes. So cooldown changes is a huge deal. We mentioned the removal of the mana regeneration cooldowns. Are the major healing cooldowns still in place for the different classes, or have they changed a bit?
They're pretty similar to how they were. A lot of them got streamlined down, like Paladins no longer have Divine Favor, Avenging Wrath, and Guardian. All 3 of those were mashed together into one cooldown called Avenging Wrath that does all of the things that the other 3 previous ones did. But by and large, every healer is going to have one big 3-minute cooldown that does a lot of healing. That's pretty standardized. The only oddball is Disc, which still has its power word barrier that it always has.
So that's a funny one because it's not really putting out. It's a nice cooldown, don't get me wrong. But Dayani, do you feel that Disc is at a slight disadvantage with that one being their big 3-minute cooldown?
It's a little bit tough to say exactly because I haven't run the math, but on sort of a gut feeling thing, I think they might be. The Warlord's model isn't about taking as much damage as you can literally possibly deal to a raid and then healing back up quickly. And in that model, which was MOP, barrier was really strong because there was so much damage coming in, there was a lot to mitigate, and it did a lot of good. In Warlords, there's less damage coming in, and it's, less likely to kill you outright. So preventing it a little less important than it used to be.
It's a really
but I'm-
strange reversal, right?
Yeah, it
back to
is.
Cataclysm, to be sitting here now going, is Barrier the worst healing cooldown?
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely an interesting change for sure. So, talking about that heal use, so what have we got? Any big gameplay changes in the use of heals? Obviously, we're losing all of the little baby heals, aren't we? So, like heal from priest, I believe, healing wave from restoration shaman.
Yeah, some are getting renamed as well for extra confusion.
Oh, yeah, for extra
The
confusion.
little
Yeah,
heals get
that's
renamed to
great.
be the big heals.
Let's just think this is the rename expansion. So, has that and other changes affected the actual use of heals in different situations at all, apart from the removal of those smaller spells? So, what's your thought, Dayani?
I'd say, yeah, it's changed a little bit. The most important change, though, is really that the AoE healing's been toned down, so you're more likely to want to use your single target heals when only a few people are injured instead of just leaning on your AoE healing to cover that up.
So have they made those more mana inefficient, or how have they altered those multi-target heals?
Yeah, that's right. Mostly they're more mana inefficient, and also they're kind of a lot less powerful than they used to be. The idea is they're meant to be good when you're actually healing multiple targets, but in MOP, we kind of have a situation now where if one person is injured, you cast Chain Heal, and if 3 people are injured, you cast Chain Heal, and if 20 people are injured, you cast Chain Heal. So,
If
they're
Wild
kind of
Growth
trying to
is off
change that up a
cooldown,
little.
cast Wild Growth.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, is it the same for druids? Because you guys have been the blanketing class for a while. Is it a similar situation where your AoE's been toned down a little bit in Warlords of Draenor?
The biggest druid AoE used to just be rejuve spam, and that's in essence toned down because you can't do it in the world of reduced regen. You still AoE heal heavily with rejuvenation, but you will have to do it more judiciously than you did before.
So the general pacing over the course of a fight for your mana management is it, changing drastically with how you mentioned that the healing model in Warlords is different than MOP?
That's the biggest
Yeah.
change, I think. You'll start a fight at full mana, you'll start spending it. Halfway through the fight, you'll be watching your mana sink, and if you're at 25% mana, you're going to have to start thinking about how you're in trouble. And that's not a sort of dynamic that we've had for really a whole expansion, where you just spend an entire fight reacting quickly to people taking damage, plowing out whatever heals you can, and as long as you're keeping up in the spur of the moment, then you're fine.
Right. So that's an interesting dynamic, actually. She says, getting the words out really well there. So obviously with the removal of the mana cooldowns, you can't really go back if you mess up your mana through a fight. Like if you accidentally cast too many healing surges or too many flash heals early on and you're just not smart with your mana partway through a fight, is there anything at all that you can do to get that back, to right your wrongs, so to speak?
Righting the wrongs a little bit tough, but what you can do is lean a lot more on the efficient version of those heals and just sort of let your mana regen. I mean, in Warlords, you're not in the situation where if you don't cast a heal right this second, everyone is going to die and everything will be ruined forever. You have time to react to things. You can kind of take a breath, lean on your efficient heals, let your mana come back a little. Take a potion. It's okay. You'll be fine.
Absolutely. Have they made any changes to potions as far as mana goes? Have we still got the usual potion of focus, potion of concentration type setup? It's all the same as before.
Yeah, same as.
Yeah, I remember finding that on some of the profession guides. I've been updating things like alchemy guides and all sorts of good reagent stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as mana management goes, you were talking about moving into the more efficient heals. So if my understanding is correct, you've got a heal for every spec that is going to just... Is it mana positive? Are they mana positive heals, or are they just mana neutral?
Spamming anything will make your mana sink a little overall, I think, but by mana positive, we really mean if there's not much damage. If there's a ton of damage going out and you're behind, there might not be much you can do. You've planned poorly. But in periods of low damage, if you make yourself stop using unnecessarily expensive spells and try to do all the healing there is to be done with Healing Touch or Heal or the equivalent heals, yeah, your mana will hover where it is or go up most likely.
Great. So
Yeah, that's right. And damaging abilities. Like every spec has something that's free. So if you're in another situation where there's not a lot of healing to be done, you're kind of low on mana, but you don't just want to stand around because that's boring.
Yeah.
You can always lean on, Wrath or Lightning Bolt or something and do something that, contributes to the raid a little bit without spending all your mana. So that's good.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about things that are going away, like a lot of, heals getting renamed. What are some interesting changes for new things that are coming? We don't want to go into super detail on every spec because that's why we have guides, but, what are the ones that really stand out as being, really cool new additions that you like for healing talents?
Hamlet, fire
Go
away.
ahead,
Take
Hamlet.
it away, Hamlet.
My favorite new talent is a simple one. It's germination, which is you can have 2 rejuves on a target at once. And everything about that talent is great. It's simple. The druids have this level 100 talent row with no new abilities. In keeping with ability pruning, it's all passives. And it's really simple. No new mechanics, new buttons to press. You keep using the spell you're already using. It lets you do more of what you already like doing. It's fun to use. It's fun to see 2 rejuves ticking on someone who's taking damage. And it's a great, elegant talent. I think it's just a hit of a talent in that tier.
Awesome. What about you, Diani? What's your take on that? Favorite talents?
Oh gosh, it's so hard because I want to say high tide just because it makes more pretty blue lasers and that's great. But if we're going on mechanical concerns, I really like clarity of will for the disc priest tree. I think it's a fantastic way to, give them something that's really powerful and proactive. So it keeps the theme of the proactive healer. But it also makes them make a choice. It's not sort of a blanketing absorb. They have to pick the target who's going to be taking the damage and then spend some time casting that spell. So it, gives them very powerful capabilities, but they have to sacrifice something in return. And I think that's a really good design.
Yeah, definitely. I certainly like the ones where it's kind of like you're making interesting choices. You're not just sort of able to feel really overpowered. They're fun sometimes, but I kind of like the ones with choices as well. So let's talk about the opposite side of the coin. Hamlet, what is your least favorite talent or spell? Like, it doesn't have to be a druid one, whatever takes your fancy.
I'll stick with the druid one just because the first thing that came to my mind was Genesis. It's not a new talent. It's a reworked spell that's now supposed to be the one that AoE goes.
I think you might be muted, Hamlet. You're very, very quiet. Maybe picking up.
I'm sorry.
There we go. All right, let's try that again. Run us through that one again.
I do that on conference calls.
Your
at
least
work.
favorite
Oh, don't worry.
talent.
Your least favorite talent again.
I will go with a druid one. I'll go with Genesis, which isn't new, but it was a spell that people were hoping would be reworked now that it's the core of our AoE burst healing with Bloom gone. And it's still an expensive thing you spend a global on that doesn't do any added healing. And we're already talking about how we're in a world where usually healing people up isn't the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
If rejuves are ticking on everyone who needs healing, most of the time you're fine letting them tick out, not spending a lot of mana to speed them up. So again, it's a spell that I'm not using much in the beta, just like I didn't in the previous expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, absolutely.
What
All
about
right.
you, Diani?
Yeah.
So my least favorite, probably, unfortunately, is Storm Elemental. He looks so cool. I really want to love him. I know, it's a shame. But frankly, he's not that powerful for the 5-minute CD that you're getting out of him.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're using him for like dungeons or something, he can be a real pain in the butt to use because you've got to set him on enemies. You've got to like sort of micromanage him. You've got to make him attack an enemy, and then he's going to do his little splash healing just around that enemy. So you have to make sure it's the ad that the melee are going to be on, or else he's not healing anybody. I just think, it was a cool concept that maybe didn't quite translate very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard things like people wanting to... Is he affected by the Primal Elementalist level 90 talent as well?
He is, but the only thing that he gains is another cool-looking skin, and...
He's good for his
the
screenshots.
utility. Yeah, exactly. He's beautiful. But the only thing he gains from that is utility. He doesn't get any stronger healing, which is great because it means you're not locked into 2 talent choices whenever you pick one. But it is kind of a shame that, you can't really make him more powerful than he is.
Yeah, that is a shame. Like, I wanted to love him so much. He's sort of, like, I was trying out the level 100 talents for the Resto Shaven, and as anyone who follows you on Twitter will know, I've actually main changed away from it, sadly. But I was trying it out. I played a ton of it on the Vita. But, yeah, I was so disappointed with him. It was such a sad change, because he's such a cool-looking guy, and I love my elementals. Oh, they're so much fun. Sad days. So... Let's actually hit some of the specific interesting changes. I'm doing really well with getting the words out this evening. We don't want to get really deeply into individual class discussion. These guys are serious theory crafters, and if you want that kind of content, it is on their sites. It's all there. So if you want to get really into the depths of it, do that. But let's just hit some of your sort of the really interesting spells here. Now, we've got in the notes here absorbs and disciplines. So, Diane, I'm assuming that's your speciality here. What's going on with absorbs and dis that's so interesting?
All right. Well, mainly the big change in Warlords that is going to affect absorbs is that, we're not taking damage that's really super spiky or really super dangerous anymore, and we're sitting below full health. When you're below full health, an absorb is pretty much point for point equivalent to a heal. It's not better than a heal the way it is in MOP, where you're on full health nearly all the time. So that's going to be kind of a big change. You'll see absorbs are going to make up a lot of Disc's healing, but that's not going to make Disc as incredibly overpowered as it has been for part of MOP.
Interesting case. And what about the Spirit Shell things? Is that a talent again now for Discipline? Spirit Shell's gone back into the talent tree, or is it a special ability?
Yeah, they moved it out of baseline Discipline and put it into their, I think, 75 talent row, which is cool. Spirit Shell was a nice ability. I mean, even though everyone knew that some parts of Disc had to be dismantled a bit for a new expansion, Spirit Shell I thought was great. In fact, when they took it out, I thought that was one of the parts of Disc that was fine, and didn't see why it had to go out. So I was happy to see it come back as a talent. I think it'll be popular.
Yeah, definitely, and it sort of still really seems like a fun ability. Like I've always healed mostly in PvP. While I did PvE heal for most of Mr. Pandaria, it's always been PvP healing that's my thing. And Spirit Shell is one of those really fun ones because it's crazy hard to use well, but when you get it right, it is absolutely awesome. Another thing we've got mentioned here, Tower of Radiance. So what's the big deal with Tower of Radiance? Why do we like that one?
Well, Tower of Radiance used to be their Paladin's way of generating holy power at any time by healing the tank. It's, right now in raids, actually, they spam Holy Radiance so much that maybe it's the same, but in Warlords, like we have been talking about, we'll be talking about, you'll cast heals on the tank a lot. And I think that they were worried that there's this Paladin gameplay where all you do is cast heals on the tank just for the purpose of getting holy power and then throwing Eternal Flame everywhere. So they changed it so that you no longer get holy power from casting direct heals on the tank. You only get it from your Holy Shocks and Holy Radiances, it makes sense, but I think Paladins are concerned that they have so much less holy power than they were used to. So at the very least, it's a big change. We'll have to see how it feels when they're more used to using Eternal Flame and Light of Dawn so much less often than they had been. Maybe it'll be the same as everyone else using their AoE heals less.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about monk abilities? Have you got anything cool in the monk department, or not particularly?
Yeah, we've seen some data mining on some monk things recently, so I think you guys want to talk about Crane Stance.
Yeah, Crane Stance is pretty cool. A lot of people were really worried at the start of the beta that Crane Stance was going to be something that nobody would ever actually use in a raid. The healing, when we very first started out,
just run us what Crane Stance is again, if people are.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Back to
That's right. Okay, so Mistweaver monks have always had this ability to punch enemies and turn that into healing. And in Warlords, that is only going to be available if you're in the stance of the Spirited Crane. So it's like you have to actually make a decision. Okay, now I'm going to punch things, and then later I'll switch back to my other stance and I'll heal things. And at the start of Warlords, it was pretty weak, and people didn't think they were going to be able to use it in a raid at all. They thought, it doesn't do any damage, it doesn't do any healing, nobody's going to let me punch things. But it's been buffed a lot over the course of the beta, and now it's in a point where, primarily for mana reasons, monks are going to want to use it in raids pretty frequently. So I think that's really cool.
That's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I think it's nice to have that different style. It's a really different style to any of the other healers, that sort of up close and personal melee punching stuff. So one of the other things we wanted to talk about is just the general sort of feeling of, how does it play? And it's hard when you're a sort of like a healing scientist almost, like these guys, to quantify things in such subjective terms as how does it feel to play these games.
Yeah, I mean, so many people were sort of alarmed or shocked by how there was major changes coming in Warlords, but what's it actually like playing it? Besides just the shock reaction to the announcements.
Exactly.
Well, I personally have been having a blast anytime I get to heal on the beta. It's fantastic. What about you, Hamlet?
Yeah, I definitely like it a lot. I mean, as far as how it's changed, it's the same and it's different. A lot the specs have generally kept their feel of what spells you use a lot, things like that, what their strengths and weaknesses are. But it's a different world. You can even tell when you go and heal a 5 man. People are at lower HP often. You have to worry about your mana more. A lot of the things we've talked about. Um, you it's a lot of it's summed up by mana mattering and not being able to spam as much. It's like if I think if you went into the new expansion and that was their goal in changing healing, everything else follows from that. All these other changes we're talking about, they want it to be a decision to use a spell that does a lot of healing and to spend mana on it, not just be pumping them out constantly. And that's a really big change, especially in raids. Raid healers right now at the end of Mists use their strong AoE spells nonstop. That's never, I think, how healing was supposed to be, and they're really trying to go back on that now.
Yeah, I definitely get the impression of that. I mean, like I say, I have been doing a ton of healing on the beta, and I feel like they've made it sort of really matter. Like, your spell choice really matters again. And to me, that's a good thing. Like, healing shouldn't be a case of, oh, I'm just going to use the AoE spell because why wouldn't I? Someone else might get injured by the time it goes off. And that, to me, is a really sort of strange and uncomfortable situation for healing, and it seems to be the case towards the end of a lot of expansions. I think one of the big fears that a lot of people had was particularly around a blog that I believe Celestalon put out early on in the development cycle, talking about keywords like triage, and I know a bunch of people online
It
freaked
sounded like
out.
Cataclysm.
Exactly that. Yeah, they felt that it was going to go back to the Cataclysm healing, like the Grim Battle days and all of those good times. And like personally, I didn't mind that, but I know a lot of people were freaking out. Do you think that that fear is actually qualified, Dayani, or do you think that that's a little bit unfair?
Look, it's a little bit overblown. I mean, everybody's going to be nervous when when they hear that big changes are coming. I've been doing a lot of dungeons on beta, and mostly it's not so bad. We have a lot of extra tools now that we didn't have in Kata. A lot of things that help us out when we have to move and heal. A lot of things that help us out when everybody's taking damage, that are going to make it a lot easier on us. And they've given us this sort of more powerful spirit as a way to help us out, to make sure that it's not exactly like Kata. We're going to have the mana to do the things we need to do, but we are going to have to learn again that we can't heal through stupid.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think they were saying that the dungeons in Warlords were meant to be a step up from the heroics in Mist of Pandaria, but people still shouldn't be scared. As a healer, like you guys mentioned that you had more cooldowns or things in your toolkit. People shouldn't be scared about doing a heroic dungeon in Warlords, right?
Hamlet,
I
what's your
don't
take?
think anybody should be scared.
They
Scared.
shouldn't. I mean, it will be harder than they're used to. I don't mind saying that. I think some of the Blizzard blogs may have shied a little away from saying that, but at the very least, it'll be harder because your last year and a half of doing dungeons have been in much better gear for 5-player dungeons than what you'll be in a month. That's always true, and people always forget. But also, it'll be a little harder to be doing dungeons again, where if people don't pull well or CC well, or you try to fight 2 packs at once in content where you can't handle it, what's going to happen is people will be taking too much damage. They won't die instantly, but you won't be able to keep up. And that might be a dynamic that's frustrating to people unless they're really good at thinking about what's going wrong. I think people, tanks and DPS, will have an instinct to blame the healers and complain that they're not getting heals every time a group wipes. And maybe pugs will be terrible this way. We'll have to think about that.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
But so it's going to be different in that way, and people will have to think more about whether the group's taking too much damage or whether you're not healing as well as you can be.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a sort of valid change, and I think that the problem as well is that we get into the situation where we're kind of at now. It's kind of similar to the end of Wrath, I feel, for healers, where it was, and DPS and tanks as well. In all honesty, the dungeons were very straightforward. You could rattle through them, AoEing all the time. You didn't really need to CC, you didn't really need to worry. Like, as long as you all hit some buttons at some point in time, stuff was going to fall down. And the dungeons at this point in Miss Pandaria, like, because we only ever had the first round of dungeons, are very much in the same spot. start. Like, if you go in there and breathe on the mobs in top level raiding gear, they fall over. So it's really, really straightforward. And I think it's just going to be a big mentality shift for everybody in Warlords to get used to ideas of, oh my god, we've got a CC now. Oh my god, we've got to actually make sure we're not standing in bad. We can't pull an entire room at once. We can't, AoE down 3 groups at a time, or we're all going to die. And it's actually not the healer's fault.
And that feeling should be fresh if they keep adding dungeons through the course of the expansion like they want to. So it shouldn't get to a point where your only dungeon option is to sort of steamroll things.
Yeah.
The first tier of dungeons, there should be something that's always challenging, hopefully.
Exactly. And I know that you guys, I don't think any of us has actually taken the time to level a healer from a 90 up to 100.
Yeah, I doubt they did Tanan Jungle.
Yeah, nobody wants to do Tanan Jungle. But I know that we've had dungeons which have scaled you guys down to different levels. How are you feeling that the mana, particularly the mana and the healing, how's it feeling as you're leveling, Dayani?
Well, basically, when you go into Warlords at level 90 and you do like that very first dungeon, Blood Maw Slag Mines, you're going to feel like you're pretty much invincible and impossible to run out of mana. And that's because the base mana regen, just when you're at level 90, has been doubled from what it is now.
Wow.
in this Sepend area. And I think that's specifically for this purpose, to let you kind of ease into the healing changes without, just smacking you across the head with having to worry about mana. But it feels fine. And as you level up a bit, as you go into higher level dungeons, that bonus mana kind of drops off some. So it sort of just gradually guides you into knowing that you have to think about your mana. I think it's a really great design.
Yeah, and it certainly isn't the case that at level 100 you're going to be able to completely not worry about your mana, is it, Hamlet? It's really sort of getting you into that feeling of having to actually worry about it and really think about your spells, right?
Yeah, you're going to ease into the new Warlords healing world we're talking about, and it'll really hit you at level 100. Level 90 actually will be really easy on mana, at least based on those numbers and how it was like in the beta. It'll feel the same. It's 100 where suddenly you'll be playing in the new style.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, every week on the show we talk about the new fun features that we've got over on wowhead.com, and because we've got a healing special and we've got some great healing guests, we kind of wanted to talk about what our guests and what we're finding useful in the lead up to the expansion. So Perk, I know that we've got a ton of cool features for healers, so do you want to just hit the big ones for us? Let us know what would be your top few features for healers to have a look at on Wowhead.
Sure. Well, I mean, these work for healers, but then they also work for people that are interested in just sort of learning about their spells or, gear or becoming a better player in general. So we have tons of spell information. We revamped what our spell pages looked like a few months ago, so you can take a really simple looking tooltip and then look in the spell detail section and see, how one spell can modify different abilities in different ways, so you know exactly what that spell is doing. And something that, going back to the spirit comment I made earlier, it's really useful to see how your gear is going to convert in the pre-patch. So if you go to the profiler, which is wowhead.com/list, and you pull up your character on Battle.net, and then you switch the URL to WOD, or you click Warlords next to the search box, you can then see how all your stats roughly change. So you can be like, oh, this chess piece that used to have Spirit now has crit on it. Or you can be like, oh, let's see how things change with the stat squish. And you can sort of go between those two items, see what your hit gems are going to turn into. Well, I guess healers don't have hit, but you can see how stats that are going away turn into other things when the pre-patch hits. So I think that's really useful, and I think it just will sort of calm everyone down if they can. It's not going to be a shock on Tuesday when you log in and you see that, you have different amounts of all these stats. But yeah, I know you guys use Wowhead a ton for all of your various projects. So, why don't you talk about things that you find useful? Because, I'm sort of a niche person too. There are things I do all the time that, other people don't use. So.
Yeah, I mean, for making spreadsheets or blog posts or forum posts that I want to be backed up by numbers or anything in this umbrella that everyone calls theory crafting, you pretty much can't do it without Wowhead tabs open. And I mean, the site has a lot of stuff on it, but I think for what I'm doing most of the time, I live in the spell database. And what you said about the live Warlords checkbox for items, I use it all the time for spells. Ever since Wowhead spell info started including spell coefficients, it's sort of we used to have to test them in game, and they started appearing on Wowhead, and it kind of changed everything that way. You can look up a spell coefficient anytime, and it makes everything very easier. That's one really specific thing, but it's probably a huge percentage of the info I'm constantly grabbing. And then the spell's modified tab, seeing what buffs and passives affect what spell, because in addition to the numbers on the spell, the coefficient, I want to find out what talents, passives, auras improve it beyond what's listed. So it's just a lot of nitpicky data that I am constantly sifting through.
Yeah, I think you also like the spell change log. At least you tell me about that sometimes.
I love the spell change log. That is so useful. Diana, what are your sort of top tips for healers using Wowhead? What would you hit up as a healer?
Well, again, because I have a lot of focus on the theory crafting side, I really love that you can look at a class's specialization and see all the things that are specific to that spec alone. And one thing that's really handy about this is that they took all of our passes out of our spellbook, and I can never remember, when I'm a disc priest, what passives do I have? I'm not sure. Why is this doing more healing than I expected? So running to Wowhead and looking that sort of stuff up, that's been really, really handy for me.
Absolutely. And it's also very much worth mentioning that we hit up the level 90 guys last week on the show. We talked about them briefly, and actually the guys which are set for healing classes, which some of them are written by certain people on this show.
Maybe.
Just quietly, and neither of them is me or Park. So we've got...
Definitely not me.
Yeah.
That'd be scary.
So Hamlet, you wrote the Resto Druid guide.
Yep.
As well as the Balance Druid guide, I believe.
Yeah, I think that one's not up
That's
yet,
not up
right?
yet, but we'll coming soon.
Yeah,
so.
we have a batch of the non-healing guides going up very soon. We have a
Exactly.
lot of them already done.
And Diana, which ones did you put together for us?
I did Mistweaver Monk, Holy Paladin, and Resto Shaman.
So yeah, just a few there. So between these two guys, we've got everything but priests covered on the Wowhead guys. So do definitely check those out, particularly if you're listening to the show and thinking, oh my god, I really need to check out what's changing in Warlords of Draenor for my healer. I haven't even thought of this. So definitely have a look at those.
One more thing before we switch back is that these guys were getting over. These guys were talking about it right before the show. Is that basic item filters are really good. You can be like oh my god, like, what's that trinket that has multi-strike again? So if you go to wa.wowhead.com database items, you can say, okay, show me all the things that drop from Siege of Orgrimmar that have this multi-strike stat. Or, hey, I want the gear with Spirit. I want to see, what are the slots that have Spirit? Or it's like, well, Spirit isn't on every single deck now, so just show me the bosses that have Spirit on it now. So, just... I know that's not as fancy as theory crafting modified by tabs, but it is really useful. And even before the show, you guys were like, oh, how do I look up trinkets again on Wowhead? Where's that filter link? So definitely use the filters. They're all there. You can use the special item finder tool that we talked about last week on the show. That will instantly take you. Hey, I'm level 90. Hey, I want to see heroic raid gear. Hey, I'm a disc priest. You just click 3 boxes and it shows you all that loot.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And particularly if you're planning, like I am, to level your character in Warlords of Draenor initially via dungeons, something Tanan, something. You're definitely going to want to have a look at that and consider if there are any items in there that you've got already, anything you want to try and grind out in the 6.0 period while you're getting used to your spec and how it plays, just before you get into Warlords and really into that leveling process to make your life a little bit easier. So moving on back into the core healing nature of the discussion here, we're going to hit up some of the major types of content that you're going to be seeing in Warlords of Draenor from a healing perspective. So the first thing that every healer sees in a new expansion is, of course, dungeons. Now, Hamlet, we kind of talked a little bit about dungeons here already in the show. So give us your thoughts on the big changes. Like, we've mentioned that it's going to be harder, but have you enjoyed doing the dungeons? Are they really like, oh my god, this is so tiresome as a healer, or are they kind of fun?
I've had a lot of fun on dungeons on beta. It's actually been most of what I've done because the raid tests are all while I'm at work, but I've been grabbing people, Diana and others, to do challenge modes on beta or normals or heroics when that fails whenever I can. They're great. There's something actually really fun about the new system that we've been describing in 5-player content. It's sort of like, even in old content, solo healing something was a little more alive of an experience than spamming out AoE heals with 5 other people in a raid team. And you really feel it now, though, because you're making all these decisions about what spells to cast, and you're the only one who's doing it. Like, if someone's sinking and you don't heal them, nobody else will. So you always have that feeling, but it's harder now to keep up. That's kind of the
Yeah.
triage feeling they were talking about. People are afraid of it, but it really means you're not going to be able to heal off everything right away. That's what's going
Yeah.
on. People are going to be at low HP, and you will have to figure out what's most important nonstop. It's a lot of fun.
It's definitely nice as well to have that feeling of being important again. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I've kind of lost that feeling in doing the sort of 5-man content towards the end of Mr. Pandaria. I feel less vital than I did in Cataclysm in the early parts. So I'm looking forward to feeling like I'm really having an impact again. So Dayani, we've spoken already a little bit about how you are kind of crazy with the proving grounds. Have you been doing them on the beta as well? Have you been pumping out the endless achievements? How are you finding those on the beta?
Yes, I've been doing them quite a bit, although recently they've been plagued with a couple of bugs that make them incredibly easy and so therefore boring. But yeah, I've done Endless on Shaman, Druid, Monk, and Paladin, getting to Endless Wave 30 on the beta. I've been kind of letting Priests slide because, I'm not writing any guides about them. So I don't need to know what they do anymore.
Well, you're not the Druid either, but everyone likes Druid, so...
Everyone
because they're easy.
Oh, that's fighting talk right there, that is. So how do they compare to live? That's a big question, I think, for people. How do they compare?
Yeah, I think the big question is too, like, what's up with silver? How does silver compare to live? Because you need silver to do, that's like a mandatory requirement in Warlords for some content.
Yeah, that's right. You have to achieve silver in order to be able to queue for random heroic dungeon groups. I gotta say, I know that sounds daunting to a lot of people to think that there's a test that they have to pass before they can do it. But to my mind, the best thing about it is that, yeah, heroic dungeons are a little bit harder than what you're used to from MOP. And just having something there that says, hey, you have to do this first, kind of tells you to expect that you're going into something a little bit harder than what you're used to. And I think if there had been a little like a pop-up box or something at the start of Kata that said, hey, this heroic dungeon's going to be a little bit harder than what you expected, people might not have been so angry when they went in there and had trouble.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see. Silver is actually pretty easy. It's a lot like what it feels like now on live. I mean, the wave structure is identical. So if you are worried about doing that in Warlords, go hop in live and have a look and see what it's like. I think you'll find it's not as scary as it looks.
So
you were adamant about Proving Grounds.
I was terrified.
Back when you hadn't done them yet, and I was telling you how much fun Proving Grounds were, and working on Endless and stuff, and then you tried them, and
and I became addicted.
Yeah, that was a success.
Yeah.
So I just heard you say that are they actually, the waves are exactly the same as live? They haven't really changed the waves at all between live and beta, Hamlet? It's really precisely the same?
I think so, either precisely or almost precisely the same. If you can do silver on live, you'll be able to do it in Warlords. Maybe as soon as you learn how your class abilities have changed, but that won't take long.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's a good.
That also ties into, if you have been struggling with silver, or if you are main switching and you feel a little intimidated trying to do silver on a new class, that's why we're putting out these series of level 100 class guides that sort of teach you the basics, like very short and simple, to the point, and they should help you get to Proving Ground Silver. And we'll also be putting up a post specifically outlining all of the waves in case you really want to be prepared and want to sort of memorize like where things are, just for that little extra bit of being prepared.
Yeah, so have you guys done that? Is that the process that you've been doing, Dayani, to get all these endless 30 waves? As you've been really spelling it out and planning, or have you just been winging it and just being amazing?
Well, since it's identical to the ones on live, I was, really lucky. I was able to use the cooldowns and the tricks and tips that I learned from doing it in MOP to get them on WOD. It was, pretty much identical. I will note that in all of our guides, we do mention specific talents and glyphs and things that will help you out with the Proving Grounds. So if you are worried about it and you do want to be prepared, go have a look at the guides that you guys have put up about healing, because that'll really help you.
I also want to point out that some of the concerns in MOP with gearing have been changed in Warlords. Like, for example, if you had sockets on your gear in MOP, you had a distinct advantage between sockets, or like socket bonuses, or having 2 sockets if you had the right sort of, Eye of the Black Prince on the Throne of Thunder weapon. And with how sockets are changing, all of that sort of overpoweredness is going away. Sockets have a really rare chance to be on gear, And because that would make things unfair if you just sort of rolled all the gear with the, prismatic sockets on it, all those sorts of benefits from sockets are being disabled in Proving Ground. So that levels the playing field. You don't have to think, well, I have to, grind out this version of the weapon that has the socket and this balance of stats, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth sort of asking you guys about that with the theory crafting side of things as well, Hamlet. The impact of the change where they're now, I believe, scaling the Proving Grounds to you rather than scaling you to the Proving Grounds. Is that a noticeable impact for healers?
So if we're talking about what everyone's concerned about, the silver requirement, then not really. I mean, all those gearing details, even the things like sockets, Perk knows about because she did Proven Assailant on a rogue, which was really hard. But for
And bad
anyone doing,
timeless idle gear.
yeah, but for people who are trying to learn silver, it's hard not to sound a bit snobby about it when you say that all you need to do silver is to learn the basics of your class. But that is how it is. It's not really anything about your gear. If you go in at any gear at eye level 615, which is what they're going to be tuned for, I think you would be just fine for meeting your silver requirement once you get used to how to do it, how to play your class.
Absolutely, yeah. So moving away from the Proving Grounds a little bit now into raids, and obviously raids are the big thing. They're the cherry on the cake for PvE players. So we haven't talked about them at all yet, really, I don't think. So kind of finger in the air, knee-jerk reaction, how are you feeling about the raids that you've done so far on the beta?
Well, I'll probably start with that because I've actually done all of the mythic testing on the beta because I can get up at 2:30 in the morning for those raid tests.
And this is why Dayani will be writing overviews of raids for us.
Such dedication.
Yes, that's right. Or insanity, you pick. I've actually enjoyed raid healing quite a bit on the beta. It's in live right now, raiding is very much just about spamming your AoE output as much as possible. And while you still want to use your AoE spells in raids, that's not going to change ever because you have so many more people to heal. AoE spells are always going to be good. But so that's not really changing. But now you literally can't just do nothing but AoE heals. You have to worry about your mana. You have to manage it, and that means taking the time to use some single target healing now and then. And that's actually effective when you do it, and it feels really great. So I've been having a great time with it. I know a lot of people are really concerned about how their class is going to perform in raids, but so far I think for the most part everybody seems good.
Absolutely.
How many healers do you think will be in the different raids? Will some people are concerned about their raid spot, if they feel like they're weak or if they should DPS instead. I even know that you've been learning elementals, so how many healers do you think will be in mythic or a 10-man versus a 30-man heroic?
I think all we know is what they've told us, which is 4 to 5.
Yeah, that's right. Mythic's meant to be balanced around 4 to 5 healers, and I think Watcher said on Twitter recently that he was going to go through and increase some of the amounts of raid damage on fights that were traditionally being way underhealed on the beta. So that's really heartening to hear, that he's committed to making sure that we have raid spots for the healers going forward into Warlords, which is really handy. And then scaling, I think, is going to be pretty fluid. When you only have 10 people, you probably only need 2 healers, because when you have 20, you probably want 4 or 5. When you have 30, maybe you'll want 6.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also been some changes to smart healing as well. Things like, I know, Shaman, we've been pretty much in the camp of that for a little while. So chain heal and all. What's been the impact of that for the raid healing, in your opinion? Go ahead, Hamlet.
Go ahead.
It's been great. I mean, that's a lot of what's behind what she was saying, where it feels good to use heals on individual people. When someone was at low HP, when you think about it in Miss, if someone is at low HP, the first thing that's going to happen is in the next few seconds, a pile of smart healing effects is just going to hit them. There's almost no reason to single out a person, focus on them, and cast a big heal. Smart healing sort of has this equalizing effect on everyone in the raid. It won't be like that at all now when what used to be smart healing is now distributed randomly across the raid. So that, combined with not being able to spam out AoE healing constantly, having to use the single target heals, and having it matter who you cast them on, because they'll still be damaged by the time your cast finishes a second and a half later, is a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you finding that the result of that is that you're obviously Diana, you mentioned that you're going more into the choosing to use single target heals. Are there things like you'd say that there's points at which if you've got, I remember the sort of shaman thing from a while back was if you had fewer than three people or fewer injured, you shouldn't really be using chain heal. Is there numbers like that where you're like, no, here's the cutoff for what you should be doing? So I remember talking to Celestalon and him saying that if you needed to have 3 or more people injured for it to be worthwhile. Is that what you found in your experience doing the raids?
It certainly is, and that's primarily a function of the mana cost of your AoE healing. If it's not going to be fully effective, if it's not going to, you know, well, I guess not fully effective, but if it's not going to be like at least 60% effective, you probably don't want to be casting it. You'd probably be happier to save a little mana, use a healing wave on the person who looks like they're in the worst shape, trust that the other healers in your group are going to be doing something similar, and save up that mana so that you can whip out those chain heals when the boss just starts going crazy and, you know, killing everybody.
And if you've been in a raid test, you know that when the boss does a big raid-wide AoE, that knocks everyone down to medium HP. It's not like now where they get topped off in a few seconds. It'll be a process of many seconds of the healing team casting AoE heals. So you will still use them a lot, and they'll actually do 0 overhealing a lot of the time when you use them, and they feel a lot more rewarding that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not a case of, and I think a big message there is also just the sort of the don't freak out if you've got a whole raid team who is like really not at full health. I think one of the big things is that they've been talking about, and you know, disagree with me or tell me that I'm right, if whichever way is correct, that there's not so much spiky damage in Mr. Panda.
Yeah, we were.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we were covering that when we were talking about the tank changes last week too.
Yeah.
How they changed Resolve and, you know, in Vengeance because there were parts that just didn't make sense with how they updated the model, and then they had this sort of legacy part of the spell remaining.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you guys finding, is it being reinforced by your experience that there is less spiky damage and that having someone at 50% isn't an oh my god moment like it is kind of sometimes in Mr. Pandaria?
Yeah, I think that's really one of the things that has been done extremely well in the beta so far. When people do get low and you do start to fill them back up, you know, you don't feel like if you don't heal them instantly to full, everything is going to just basically be over. You know, you have time, you can take a breath, you can do your healing. Everybody else is doing their healing, and all of it is, you know, just like slowly filling up these half-empty buckets of health. And I think Hamlet's actually got a pretty good grip on that. He's got a HP as a secondary resource kind of theory that he likes to share. So.
All right, Hamlet, let's have the theory, the potted version, layman's terms, all right?
Yeah, I made a blog post about how you could use the HP bars of the people in the group as a sort of resource, that people can take so much damage compared to what they can now, like a few hits, and you choose when to heal them up, that especially at the end of a fight or in situations, you can choose not to heal them. You can let their HP deplete while you do other things. And if you're really aware of what's going on, you have all this room to work with by letting people get low when it's safe and filling them up at your leisure.
Absolutely. So that's a really interesting idea. So yeah, I think the sort of overall message coming out here is don't freak out if your people aren't at max health. Take your time and heal them up. But as always, every week we are going to hit up some viewer questions right now. So we've had a few great ones coming in through Twitch. Obviously, this is only the second week we've live streamed, and we've kind of messed with the schedule because of getting our special guests on. We're actually recording this, Australia and the East Coast of the US and the West Coast. Thank goodness I don't live in England anymore, is basically what I'm going to say with that one. Yeah, we've been hitting like 4 time zones right there. But anyway, we've got a few viewer questions on the Twitch channel. So thank you so much for coming down. If you want to come and watch the show on Twitch, we'll normally be recording it on a Friday afternoon. It's just today that's special because we've got these amazing healing experts in, so we wanted to grab some Twitch questions for those guys. So the first one I wanted to hit up is one that came in from Tomboy with 2 Y's, important to note, in Twitch chat. And he's just basically asking whether tank healers are even needed anymore. So Hamlet, what do you think about that? Are tank healers a thing of the past?
Tank healing is needed. They've tried to move away from having particular healing classes specialize in tank or raid healing, but compared to now in Mists, where you never cast a regrowth or healing touch on the tank in raids, at least not hard cast, it's all done by smart healing and HOTS and various other effects. Tank healing will definitely be back, but it's not going to be the province of any particular person.
Right, so it's still going to be the case that you would, Dayani, do you think you would actually assign a specific tank healer in any of the raid sizes that are out there right now in beta?
I think they do actually might assign tank healers in Mythic, and I think that the main reason that you do that is primarily because while there's not anybody who can only heal tanks, and there's not anybody who can only heal raids. There still are classes that have, stronger effects than the other. I talked about Clarity of Will earlier. It's a fantastic tank heal because the tank is going to be taking a bunch of damage in the next couple of seconds. So casting that shield on them is going to be really, really nice. In heroic and in normal difficulties, maybe not so much. You might end up sharing that responsibility with everyone because everyone's got great single target heals and everyone gets to use them now.
That's really cool. So another question from the Twitch chat from Pony on Fire, which is a slightly disturbing name, Pony on Fire, I'm just saying. He is asking, or she is asking, as healers are having a rough time keeping up on heals, are DPS using defensive cooldowns more or less crucial in Warlords of Draenor? Hamlet, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. Both. I mean, it won't be the situation now where the DPS has to use the personal at a certain time or else they die. It's not like now where Empowered Whirl is going off, everyone use your personal, and if you don't, you're in trouble. But I think it'll be more on DPS to be aware and know when they're getting low, the healers are busy, they should use something at their own discretion.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Perk, I know that you're like big on the DPS. We've been doing dungeons today. Actually, Perk and I were doing dungeons today.
Yeah,
are you finding
UBRS?
Yeah, we're running the new UBRS. And Perk, are you finding that it's the case that people are going to want to use those cooldowns even in dungeons, even on trash, or is it not really worth it?
Well, we had an interesting experience running the. We were doing UBRS on the PTR, and since some character copies were broken, people had eye level 463 gear. So that was that was interesting. But we had Sarah healing, and she was a pretty great healer. And there wasn't a part of the boss where I'm like, oh my god, I have to use Cloak of Shadows to avoid this damage, or else I'm going to fall over. I noticed that I was sort of sitting at medium health for obviously longer than I would in Mist. And when we killed the 3 bosses, there wasn't a point where I'm like, okay, this is really bad. I have to use my cooldown now. It wasn't like a synchronized thing. And I sort of did have to get used to not being at full health and just sort of shrugging and thinking that was okay.
Yeah, I think that's a real big thing for DPS to actually get their heads around, is that you're not going to sit at full health all the time. It's just not going to be the case in Warlords. You're just going to have to get used to sitting there and being okay and being chilled with not sitting at 100% health. And like me, certainly as a tank, like I've tanked a lot more in PvE than I've DPS'd. And it's sort of a case of not panicking and pushing my that big glowing lay on hands button when I'm getting low, and trusting that the healer's got it and that they're going to pull you up. So moving on to a final question for this week from Hina Lover. I don't know how to say this. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong. They say, what are the guests' stance on the healing from non-healing specs? So Chi Wave from Windwalkers, Brewmaster Monks, Rejuvenation from Feral Druids. We've got a ton of different heals that come from hybrids especially. So Hamlet, what's your take on that? What do you feel that is it as strong? Is it good? What's going on with all that?
They've come way down since Mists, and that's a very good thing. The huge bulk of healing coming from non-healers in Mists was in the form of big cooldowns. Every raid, in addition to all of its healing ability from healers, would plan out its Trank from its Moonkin, 2 or 3 healing tides, a bunch of guidances, VEs.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of others. And that got to the point where it was drowning out the responsibility of the healers to do anything at the hardest parts of the fight. So compared to those, I mean, the fact that you can still have some incidental healing from Chi Wave, I don't think you'll see Rejuve from Feral Druids as a super large component of healing. Shadow Priest, it was even taken away from Halo, etc. It's just nothing compared to when the hardest parts of the fight would come. It would be your Moonkin and Elemental healing the raid.
Yeah, that was kind of a crazy situation. Dayani, do you think that DPSers should even be bothering to consider these things in their rotation, or should they just leave the healing to the healers?
Now, I mean, I've been doing a lot of stuff as Elemental lately, and I'm still instinctively hitting that AG button when people are dropping low, thinking, oh no, I need to help out. I do think it's worth considering. And, in something that's really challenging, like challenge modes at the moment, every little bit will still help. Because we are sitting on lower health more often. Healers are going to be feeling stressed. Being able to alleviate that, even just a little bit, is a really nice thing to do for your healer. So I'm hoping to see people still using those abilities, but it's really wonderful that they can't take the place of a healer now. And I think that was something that really needed to change.
Absolutely. So the DPS will be DPSing, the healers will be healing, the tanks will be getting hit in the face, and everything is as it should be. So thank you so much for joining us this week on Wowhead Weekly with our healing special. We're sorry we couldn't answer all of the questions, but do tweet them at our amazing healing expert guest hosts. You can see their Twitters right below their names. So Hamlet is on Hamlet EJ, Dayani is on Heliocentric. It's right there.
I was going to say that if people want to, hang out after the show, I'm sure Hamlet and Diana will be happy to answer a few more questions, sort of unofficially, not on the air, but yeah.
Absolutely. And that is one of the benefits of coming down and watching the show live, is you'll get a little bit of extra time at the end before we bring the stream down to just fire away with any other questions. But anyway, you can follow me on Olivia D. Grace. You can follow Perk on Peculiar beneath our screens. Again, Hamlet on Hamlet EJ, Dayani on Heliocentric. You can follow Wowhead on Wowhead. And as always, you can find out everything that we spoke about in the show, Dayani and Hamlet's amazing guides, and all tons of information about Warlords of Draenor. Everything is linked in the post below and on Wowhead, and check out wowhead.com for all your Warlords needs. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey again. Hello again, we're back. Guess what? Surprise! There was just I don't have a ton of time, unfortunately, but there was just a couple of other questions here that we didn't get to in the show for time reasons. Holy priests. People want to know about holy priests.
What about them?
So, sorry, yeah, is anyone who played Disc as primary spec switching to Holy, and why or why not?
We also have one on Holy Priest and Resto Druids doing the same things, but better.
Yeah, I mean, Holy switching, or Disc switching to Holy isn't exactly a question for us, since neither of us main Disc, but the answer is that you will, because a lot of people felt like they couldn't raid viably as Holy last expansion, and Holy is a really fun spec, and the people who like it, I'm sure will be playing it in raids now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the healing priest, it's one of those weird situations. Like, I've played, it's not been my main, but I've played a priest since Burning Crusade in PvP healing, and it's kind of a fashion thing, like whichever one is kind of in for PvP. Like, people have always considered Disc as the PvP spec, then all of a sudden, like partway through Mr. Pandaria, it suddenly became the thing to play Holy. Like, one prominent streamer started playing Holy, and suddenly people went, oh, hang on, Chastise, that's incredible in PvP. And they made this, they put this passive on the PvP gear, which made your chakra cooldown only like 5 seconds, and then you could shift between the Chastise and the healing chakras incredibly quickly, and that made Holy really, really viable for PvP, which meant that everyone suddenly went Holy, and now it's just me on my own among all my healing PvP friends in the Disc corner, sadly casting lamenting and lonely, melancholy
I'm
bubbles.
sorry, I don't have any sympathy for anyone who plays this.
Yeah,
That is very reasonable.
I think this is our first healer podcast I've been on where there wasn't a big aside to talk about how annoying Disc priests were.
That's fair.
Interesting.
We've been very strong for a very long time. It's been ridiculous in all honesty, and I think it's good to see that atonement like changing and going away and not being ridiculously overpowered anymore. But what's the strength of Holy Priests? Like, someone says here they feel like a poor man's Resto Druid. What do you think is making them strong?
They have a good mix of tools. They have Renew, which is, it's hardly less than Rejuve. Renew is pretty much the same as Rejuve. And as far as strong burst AoE healing, they have a really good direct heals for healing up a raid, and binding heal and prayer of healing. And good tank heals. Serendipity is just a great engine for healing either a single target or a tank efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. It's someone says Twitchy FTW for the win, says at Heliocentric, how do you like Ellie? How do you like it? How do you like
I think Big Cat is probably asking the same question.
It doesn't completely suck to play a DPS right now. And that's
damned with faint praise.
Yes, that's probably the most I can say. No, I just historically am not a big fan of playing the DPS style. I love healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have been trying to learn because my raid has 7 healers on its roster.
Wow.
And as we just covered, Mythic only needs 5, and absolutely not a single one of us ever misses a raid. So,
God damn it, those
you know,
people.
I know. Damn their dedication.
3
Um,
healers from Something Wicked are going to mysteriously not return from BlizzCon.
Oh man, look out, those healers. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm in the same boat. Like, I am finally giving up my Resto Shaman. It's just, for me, it's like the PvP healing is always my big thing, and I was only maining it in PvE because I hated tanking at the end of Cataclysm so much. But I've been trying to do Ellie, and I just PvP, PvE DPS, I just can't. I don't have the brain for it, I don't think. I don't have the brain for trying to do that thing where you're really sort of hitting like, you're eking out one more DPS every week, and you're like, yeah, one more DPS. And it's sort of, like, I just don't have the mentality for that, but I can't.
For me, it's the opposite. 10 player raid going to 20. It's great. There are 3 healers now, sort of. Really 2 who usually heal, a few people who heal when they need to, and then and our raid leader's like, all right, we have 5 people on the roster, we might look at some more, and I'm like, you could, or you don't need to.
Yeah, exactly.
You were thinking of being a monk at one point as well, but you decided to stay with the druid.
Mostly when I heard about Crane's stance, it sounded really neat, but it was
Yeah.
hard to. The play style is different. I think I probably never would really have switched.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. Perk, have you ever considered healing?
No.
That was a very short and sweet response.
Yeah,
No.
I have a priest that I rolled right before Cataclysm to get all the cool tailoring recipes that were going away, and I really like some of the, Shadow Priest sets, and I wanted to have a Night Elf caster, and you couldn't have mages or warlocks at the time, so I have a priest.
Those are all the
She's
right
Shadow.
reasons. Those are all the right reasons for rolling a priest.
She looks very fashionable. She has a lot of transform.
It's
very
fine though,
pretty.
right? We need people who like playing melee DPS.
That is
Alright.
Every
definitely the
raid needs
case.
some of them around, and everyone else likes
Sacrificial
them because
melee
then
DPS.
they don't have to play melee
Yeah, all the
DPS.
people love because they don't have
Exactly,
to be melee.
exactly.
That's crazy. The raid which I'm in a raid team that's being sort of put together for WOD to do some, not like, I'm a super casual raider, I'm not like hardcore like you guys are, but we've got the opposite problem. We've got a ton of melee DPS, so we're LF ranged, which is a weird situation to be in because it's always
I'm sure
every
they'll
team.
gradually, even with
they'll
that
be there.
UBRS boss we did when the fight just went on, it just was killing the melee DPS.
Oh man, yeah.
Mechanics were just not friendly.
No, I don't know. I was hoping to see, like, they talked a lot about changing that around with Warlords of Draenor as well, and I don't know, do you think that they've actually done that? Like, have they changed it so that melee is being less punished by the mechanics of fights?
Oh,
I've
that's a
been
tough one to
following DPS
answer.
super closely. I mean, I don't know of any big systemic changes off the top of my head that make things better for melee. I think it would come mostly on the side of encounters and being careful not to punish raids for having melee in them.
Yeah, I mean, do any stand out with the challenge ones you've been doing? I thought there were a few where you're like, wow, this mechanic is really bad for, X type of class, and I thought some were melee.
I can
I'm
think
not
of a
sure.
few where I would
Yeah,
want to have
as a
melee.
Kel for melee.
Azakel, there was something else. I don't remember what it was now. We've done a bunch recently.
I mean, just to clarify,
the-
this is challenge mode, not heroic. So
Oh, yeah.
this
Yeah,
part
that's
you'll be
right.
fine.
There's definitely stuff to watch out for in heroics and melee. Like, man, I had a nightmare. Like, I've had a nightmare on the beta trying to get groups to take me through all the way through dungeons. Like, I had what's the Skyreach, and
Yeah.
there's the bit with you go around the first platform, you clear all the ads. We had a heck of a time because nobody was CCing. Everyone was just doing that. Mr. Pandaria is like, no, it's fine, no CC, don't do that thing. And then we went around there, and then we got onto the second platform, and the boss spawns these like blender blades almost, these whirling saw blades
Yeah.
that spin around. And the DPS in this group was so low that we had like 20 of the freaking things spinning around on the platform, and the melee DPS were just standing there, and I was on my priest and just leap of faithing people on cooldown. It's like, oh my god, get the message, move.
We've had a lot of fun doing that fight. It was definitely overtuned for a
Yeah.
while, and we had a whole elaborate thing with some of our friends where we worked out a strategy for it.
Oh wow.
They posted that it was easier now, but I haven't tried it since then.
Yeah, it's been a little while,
No, me
definitely. All right, guys, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to have to wrap this up. I've got to head off in about 3 minutes' time, so I am a little short on time this evening. But thank you so much for hanging out, people, on Twitch. I might actually tack this on to the end of the show.
Yeah, this was great. It was great to, have a show with guests for the first time. And
yeah, absolutely. And now what I need you to do is all look at the camera, smile and wave at the same time so I can get a cute thumbnail for the show.
Okay,
it's
let's
really
do a
important.
countdown.
All right, 3, 2, 1, now. Yay! Perfect. Awesome. All right then. Thanks so much for coming on, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out, stream chat, and we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks. It was great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye for real.